What's good? It's Woog. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. Gegard Mousasi, 46-7. Damn, that's a good MMA record. Versus Douglas Lima, 32-7 for the vacant Bellator Middleweight Title, which was vacated by the undefeated Rafael Lovato Jr. due to brain injury after his win over Mousasi to capture the title. Hardcore MMA fans follow not only the UFC, but they follow Bellator, LFA, PFL, ONE, and so forth. And it's been that way, with different organizations having their moment in the sun at different times. Strikeforce, Bulldog, World Series of Fighting, Affliction, Pride. Pride was amazing and spawned several legends, some who later became UFC champions and all-timers. Now, to casual mixed martial arts fans, MMA and UFC might as well be the same thing, like Band-Aid and Bandage. This is because the UFC is by far the dominant fight league. Bellator today is easily the #2 fight league in terms of the depth of fighter quality. And Gegard Mousasi versus Douglas Lima is the best matchup in Bellator's 2020. You've got the current 170-pound welterweight champ, Douglas Lima, who's rounded out his style into becoming perhaps the best pound-for-pound fighter in Bellator. And one of the few who could also make that claim is former 185 middleweight champ, Gegard Mousasi, who's had one of the most active and impressive mixed martial arts careers over the past 15 years in any organization. You can take a quick look at Mousasi's background and fight history and will discover that he's been a Dream champion at middleweight, a Strikeforce champ at light heavyweight, a Dream champ at light heavyweight, and much later, a Bellator champ at middleweight. After his 4-year stint with the UFC, where he went 9-3, all versus top competition. I'm going to hold this up here for a second so you can just take a look at some of the guys that Mousasi has wins against in the UFC and in other leagues. He's beaten like 4 to 6 future Hall of Famers. Yet, when people discuss the best middleweights or even light heavyweights in MMA's short history, Mousasi's name rarely comes up. And I think that the main reason for that is because he never won a UFC title. And to that, I can say, well, he's never fought for a UFC title. But the frustrating part of all this was that he was closer to a UFC title shot than ever before after going on a 5-fight win streak against Thales Ledes, Thiago Santos, Vitor Belfort, Uriah Hall, and Chris Weidman. He then leaves the UFC for Bellator. That was pretty disappointing, because I'd have loved to have seen him fight against Robert Whittaker, Israel Adesanya, Yoel Romero, Luke Rockhold, Kelvin Gastelum. I mean, come on. But he left for Bellator and has gone 4-1 over there, but hasn't looked his best since dominating Rory McDonald, the former Bellator 170-pound welterweight champ and former UFC title contender, when Rory was trying to make the jump up to 185 middleweight from welterweight. That experiment versus Mousasi didn't go well, but here we are with the current 170-pound welterweight champ Douglas Lima attempting to do the same thing, this time for the vacant middleweight 185 title, which Mousasi had lost 2 fights ago in a somewhat unspirited decision loss versus jiu-jitsu specialist Rafael Lovato Jr., who, as I mentioned at the top of this, relinquished his title due to brain injury, which has his career on ice right now. I hope he fully recovers. That's devastating news. And I said that this was kind of an uninspired win for Mousasi, and that's kind of a footnote about him, is that he always looks kind of disinterested and lackadaisical. He wears this calm poker face version of an ambivalent shoulder shrug. And this is whether he's beating Jacare Souza or Lyoto Machida, or whether he's sleepwalking in a decision loss. The demeanor on Mousasi doesn't change much. Style-wise, Mousasi has a judo and boxing background from when he was a kid. He was actually a champion in the Netherlands as an amateur. He later transitioned into mixed martial arts, and this was still like 17 years ago. So Mousasi might only be 35 years old, but his fight experience is that of a 45-year-old. We're talking 46 total MMA wins. By comparison, Donald Cowboy Cerrone has 36 wins. But Mousasi has about half of Cerrone's losses. So that also tells you where Mousasi is in terms of elite status. So Mousasi over the years has fought much of the who's who and has come out on top. at a better than 6-to-1 ratio record-wise. That's actually outstanding given his list of opponents. At his best, the dude's hands are just so nice. He's got a few submission wins and has improved over the years grappling-wise, but Mousasi has made his money having the faster hands with good power. Not Francis Ngannou Chuck Liddell power, but he's knocked a lot of people out. And he's got sneaky timing. He'll ambush his opponent with hard combinations, and he was able to close distances while throwing the combos. You see, his footwork is usually more sophisticated than his opponent's because of his deep boxing background. So he's usually dictating the terms of the exchange. It's not his opponents jumping in to his range and then surprising him. No, it's him from a boxing stance showing some head movement and feints, keeping that damn poker face on, and then unexpectedly throwing 2 to 4 fast, accurate punches at a time. But I'm kind of going back and forth in my head on whether to discuss Mousasi's hand game from a past or present perspective, because I'm not really sure which version of Mousasi still exists. I mean, he did just beat a 40-year-old Lyoto Machida in his last fight, but I mean, that's the thing. Bellator doesn't have enough great fighters per division to get a consistent measure of someone's performance levels. And Machida's best weight class was always 205 light heavyweight, not 185 middleweight. He was a former UFC champ up at 205. So now we get Gegard Mousasi versus an elite fighter in their prime, just not at their optimal weight class. Again, Douglas Lima is the champ at one division below this. But I mean, hell, I'll take it. Because as I said, Lima right now is probably viewed as Bellator's pound-for-pound best fighter. And he's just, kind of been on a tear. His last loss was a decision loss versus Rory McDonald, but since then, he's been on a 3-fight win streak. He's the guy who knocked out Michael Venom Page, one of the most viral fighters of the generation. He's that tall dude who's always spin-kicking people's heads off and just going over the top in his showboating and taunting and fighting much lesser opponents. And then when MVP, Michael Venom Page, goes up in class to fight, not weight class, but up in quality class to fight Douglas Lima, he gets knocked out. Now, a lot of people are under-discussing the fact that Page actually slipped right before the knockout. He was trying to ambush the pocket. He loses his footing for just a split second, which is enough time for an elite fighter like Lima to then kind of put you out. But that's neither here nor there. Lima won the fight. Since then, he beat Rory McDonald in a somewhat dominant performance. He didn't stop him, but I thought he won probably 4 out of the 5 rounds. So Lima's looking really, really good right now. But again, he's been doing it at 170. A little footnote in his history is one of the people he lost to way back in the day, this was 2012, was Ben Askren. So if Mousasi is still 80% of where he was at the time he left the UFC in 2017, then he should be able to avoid Lima making this a wrestling-heavy jiu-jitsu exhibition, or to beat Mousasi to the punch during their stand-up exchanges. I mean, maybe Lima could control distance with jabs and leg kicks and keep Mousasi from collapsing the pocket. But if a boxing or kickboxing fight breaks out, a prime or near prime Mousasi should take Lima's head off. And that's no knock to Lima either. If he went to the UFC right now, he'd probably be as highly touted as the last Bellator to UFC departure, Michael Chandler at 155. I do think that Lima today would fall somewhere in the top 5 or top 7 UFC welterweights. In full disclosure, the pure fight fan in me is kind of hoping that he leaves too. I just want to see the great fighters in great fights. And I just don't know if the waters in Bellator's 170-pound division are deep enough to accommodate. So, Lima is daring to be great and is taking on a very dangerous and elite striker in Mousasi, assuming Mousasi is still Mousasi. So I'm going to go with Mousasi via decision, mainly because I think that Lima will try grappling Mousasi with diminishing returns. I think that Mousasi's physical strength can keep him from getting owned up against the cage and off his back. And I think that it will soon become clear that Mousasi is a much more technical and harder hitting striker than Lima, then I'd expect Lima to start circling and making this a battle of leg kicks and jabs where Mousasi should still be the one landing the cleaner shots. And if Lima senses too much danger or becomes discouraged, then I can see this becoming a pretty boring and uneventful fight and a decision win for Mousasi, because Lima can then go into survive the fight mode. And Mousasi, as he's been getting into his later stage of his career, has become more satisfied with picking up the decision win instead of putting his foot on the gas and insisting on the stoppage. The wild cards in this one for me are Mousasi's age and Lima's up one weight class physical body strength compared to Mousasi's. I'd be pretty damn surprised if Lima can grapple Mousasi as successfully as he did Rory McDonald in his last fight at 170. Lima hasn't even competed at middleweight since 2010. So once again, I'm going Mousasi via decision. But let me know your thoughts on the fight. Let me know your thoughts on the state of Bellator's 170 and 185 pound division, and also whether you think Lima will be fighting at 185 more consistently, which I'm sure is probably dependent on how this one versus Mousasi plays out. But let me know your thoughts. And please leave your comments in the comments, like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.